Doesn't this mean that at scale, you can have something like a government use propaganda to mass gaslight a population? So implant false memories, using AI, using whatever tools they have.
Yes, that is definitely already happening.
That's terrifying. Is there anything you've learned about defending against that?
Yeah.
I guess knowing that first step is just knowing that it's possible. That's already a very powerful piece of knowledge.
That's right. So the first thing that's important is for people to understand that they are capable of creating these false memories and that they're not this really unusual, hard to generate thing, that they're actually a normal memory process. And that insight is why I wrote The Memory Illusion, is because I think people need to just understand that their minds work like this and that they're really glitchy when it comes to the accuracy of their autobiographical memories. But again, that's probably ultimately a good thing as well in terms of our overall human experience. But then, what happens if you do have an important piece of information that's important to not being distorted, right? You are a witness of a crime, for example, and you now know that this is going to be important. What do you do? And the really simple answer is don't trust your brain. Just make sure you write it down. Assume you are going to forget everything. Assume you're going to forget no matter how important, how emotional, how intense, how much you say to yourself. This is a failure of prospective memory, it's called. I will remember. You won't. Just assume that you're not going to remember. And the closer you get to the time at which an event happened, and we call this contemporaneous evidence, the closer you get in time, the more high quality that memory is going to be. And I think there's this myth sometimes that, like, if you're drunk or if you're high or if you're really emotional, that's somehow you should wait. You should sort of like go home, sleep it off, and then recall your memory. That is not what the current advice in memory research actually says. It's in the moment, as soon as possible, write it down, record it outside your brain. You can do it again when you wake up, but then at least you have an original version.
Yeah, you use the analogy of a Wikipedia page for memory. I think it's a pretty useful way to think about it. It's kind of crowdsourced by all the different influences you have, all the different experiences, all the other people, you telling other people about the memory, that interact, all of that edits the page, the Wikipedia page of your memory.
It does, and collective and individual memory are these really interesting. They interact in a really interesting way. So I would always say, so when I train, for example, people who go to deal with warlords in the German military. I was working with agents who are going abroad and who are in these really difficult situations where they had to remember a lot of information that was important for national security. They couldn't just sit there with a tape recorder being like, hey, or like their phone being like, hey, Mr. Warlord, can you just talk into this a bit closer? You can't do that. And so you have to remember it. And so what they were doing is they were coming back from their deployments and they would meet up immediately and have like a team meeting to be like, what did you remember? What happened? And the problem is that they would do that before writing their notes. And that is the wrong way around. And so they don't do that anymore because I've told them not to do that anymore. But it feels good. It feels like collectively we are going to remember more details because you do, but it doesn't mean that those details are right. And so that's where I'd always say, have your own version before you talk to anybody. Then, and my colleague, Dr. Annelies Vredeveld, is one of the experts on the effect of things like eye closure on memory and collective memory. And she has found repeatedly that if you remember things together, especially if you've already got an original version of your own, you do usually remember more details. And especially if you are helping each other to remember, like in a relationship, you'll have someone who's better at remembering certain kinds of details, maybe names or what happened or what you were doing, and the other person's better at when it happened. And so you can have these complementary memories that come in social situations, and you can then have more details that are remembered after.
Right, but there's conflicting forces here, so that's true, but also, as you said, it's true that together you can weave a narrative that never happened. So together you can solidify the thing that actually happened, maybe if you take notes beforehand. But at the same time, if you don't take notes, you can just make shit up very effectively together because you're like yes-anding the whole time, like building together a castle that's false.
Or distorted.
Distorted.
Yeah. But you can also sometimes go back to your original account and go, actually, no, that was a bit wrong. And so My as, again, an analytical person and someone who works as an expert witness on memory cases, I just wanna see all the versions. I want your version history. I want the
Mhm.
complete version history of your memory, and then I can tell you whether I think things have gone wrong here, and if so, why.
Have you seen, like, different versions of memory, and they're really conflicting?
Mhm.
Like, what have you learned about memory from that? That they can be very conflicting, people explaining the same experience, and it's very different.
Well, there's different people having very different memories of the same
Yeah.
experience, and there's the same person having different memories of the same experience. And so I work in both in some ways as an expert witness, but mostly in the individual changing their story in a dramatic way.
Ah,
And
yeah.
so a witness or an alleged victim saying that they, having X story the first time they go to the police, and then 3 years later having a very different, sometimes categorically different account. And the question is, were they just too shy initially to say what really happened? Were they under pressure from other people? Were they not really remembering? Why has it changed? Or could it be that they have been undergone some really problematic, like, hypnotherapy or just shady therapy in general that has, like, convinced them that things are maybe much worse than they initially remembered? And it's not that therapy doesn't like, therapy can bring out more details for sure, but the problem is that certain kinds of therapy mirror what we do in false memory research in terms of implanting false memories, and it just makes it really messy, and it makes the quality of the evidence really low because we can no longer tell what is because of the therapy and what's actually remembered.
This is so fascinating. What are the ways you can possibly figure out which is true? The thing you remembered initially or the thing you're now remembering 4 years later?
Receipts. That's all you got. You have to look at your original versions. If you only have your version now, the only thing you can look for is evidence that confirms or shows that it didn't happen. If you can't access that, then it ultimately is a matter of, especially if you've got, like, two people saying completely different things, it ends up being a battle of confidence ultimately.
This is a tricky question, but you mentioned therapy. It does seem like what therapists do is they want to find a problem and they can then just project the problem and then convince you the problem existed. So how do you know? Is, like, therapy even an effective? It takes a very special therapist not to implant, right? A trauma that never happened or details that never happened to a trauma that did.
It depends on the kind of therapy. So there's a lot of therapy that is evidence-based and that is very much focused on tackling sort of feelings and reactions that you have right now. Then there is an area or a bunch of areas of therapy, including psychoanalysis, which are very focused on trying to find retroactively sources of mental illness in your personal past. And I am very critical of the kinds of, well, both from an explanatory perspective, but also from a false memory perspective. I don't think that we are the way we are because of individual incidents that happened to us. I think that is a wild thing to think about the brain. Like, to be like, you are the way you are because of this one interaction you had that one time is like, I mean, maybe this explains a tiny bit of you, but what about all the other life experiences you have every single day? And so I think that there's sometimes an oversimplified searching for answers or sources of problems that we have that I don't like. I don't think it's true. And I think that there can be an uncautious approach to memory, as you were saying, where you have someone who is saying things, and your role as a therapist is to help them manage their emotions now and to feel better. And that's the other thing, is that they have a very different role than I do. The therapist is trying to manage the person's well-being now,
Mhm.
whereas I am looking at the evidentiary quality. That is I'm almost like not quite the other side, but I'm in a very different role.
You just want the truth.
Well, I'm criticizing slash analyzing their memories, whereas the therapists are more likely to be trying to help them manage the memories in their day-to-day life. And so it doesn't matter if they're true or not to therapists. What matters is that they're troubling to the people themselves. But once you get into a courtroom setting, as you say, the
Mhm.
facts and what actually happened matter. And it's not just what you remember, it's what actually happened.